The night his mother heard him sound like a child, Elon Musk was not standing on a stage, not smiling beside a rocket, not arguing with reporters, and not selling the future to a room full of investors. He was on the phone, very late, speaking so quietly that Maye Musk had to press the receiver closer to her ear. For a moment she did not hear the billionaire. She did not hear the man the world called brilliant, reckless, impossible, dangerous, visionary, and too much. She heard a tired son trying not to worry his mother. "Mom," he said, after a silence that lasted just a little too long, "I am fine." Maye knew that sentence. Mothers always know that sentence. It is the sentence grown children use when they are bleeding somewhere no one can see. It is the sentence a son says when he wants to protect the woman who once protected him. She did not answer right away. In the quiet, she could almost see him as he had been decades earlier in South Africa, a thin, serious boy with books pressed against his chest, eyes lowered, mind somewhere far beyond the room. Other children could be loud. Elon was not. Other boys could run into the sun without thinking. Elon drifted inward. He read. He absorbed. He disappeared into thoughts so large they frightened the adults around him. The world would later call that mind genius. Maye had first seen it as loneliness. "Are you eating?" she asked. Elon gave a small breath, almost a laugh, but not quite. "I had coffee." "That is not eating." "It is close enough." There it was again, the hard shell, the quick answer, the joke that was not really a joke. People heard that edge and thought it meant arrogance. Maye heard defense. She heard a boy building walls because walls were sometimes easier than asking to be understood. The public saw Elon Musk as a man who pushed, demanded, fought, and refused to bend. Maye saw the child who had learned too early that if the room turned against him, he had to survive inside himself. That was the central truth she carried, even when the world seemed determined to simplify him. The world saw the man who would not bend, but Maye still saw the boy who had learned to survive by going quiet. It was not that she thought he was fragile in the ordinary way. Elon could be stubborn enough to exhaust everyone around him. Even as a child, he could vanish into an idea so completely that meals, schedules, and ordinary family life felt like interruptions. He could be difficult. He could be blunt. He could seem far away while sitting at the same table. But mothers remember what the world forgets. They remember the child before the armor. They remember the first wounds. They remember the small humiliations that never make history books, but quietly shape a man for the rest of his life. Maye remembered the boy who did not quite fit. She remembered the long silences. She remembered the look in his eyes when he had already decided that if no one would give him a safe place, he would build a future big enough to escape into. Years later, when people saw Elon sleeping near machines, pushing through brutal hours, and speaking with the impatience of a man at war with time itself, Maye did not see only ambition. She saw a familiar pattern. The same boy, older now, still running from helplessness. Still trying to prove that pain could be outrun if he just moved fast enough. "Elon," she said softly, "you do not have to be strong for me." He did not speak. That silence told her more than any interview ever could. Because beneath all the power, all the defiance, and all the impossible plans, there was still a part of him that did not know how to be held without first explaining why he deserved to keep standing. And to Maye, that was the part of him the world never knew how to see. What the cameras did not capture was the strange burden of being his mother once the whole world began speaking his name. For most families, a son is a son. For Maye, her son became a public argument. At airports, in restaurants, in quiet rooms after speeches, people had opinions about him. Some loved him as if he were carrying civilization on his shoulders. Others hated him with a personal fury usually reserved for enemies. Strangers spoke of him as if his face on their screens gave them the right to decide what kind of man he was. Maye learned to smile through it. She had built a life out of poise. She knew how to stand straight when things were unkind. But there were days when the mother in her wanted to reach through every screen and say, "You do not know the boy I held inside my heart." The hardest part was not criticism. The hardest part was seeing how little rest he allowed himself while pretending the noise did not touch him. There were visits when his eyes looked bloodshot before he even sat down. There were meals interrupted by urgent calls. There were family moments where his body was present, but his mind was already inside a factory, a launch pad, a lawsuit, a production deadline, 1,000 people waiting for him to decide what happened next. "You should sleep," Maye would say. "I will," he answered. "When?" "After this is fixed." But there was always another thing to fix. That was the trap. The boy who had once hidden inside books had grown into a man who hid inside missions. The mission changed from software to cars, from cars to rockets, from rockets to a future so large it could swallow an entire human life. But Maye could still recognize the hiding place. In 2008, when everything seemed to be breaking at once, that hiding place became a cliff. The world now remembers that period as a heroic business story, a test of risk, a financial gamble. But inside a family, a crisis does not feel heroic. It feels like the phone ringing too late. It feels like the tightness in a mother's chest when she hears a son trying to sound calm. There were rockets failing, cars struggling, money draining, a marriage under strain, children waiting for a father who was being consumed by the things he had built. The public story was about survival. The private story was about whether a man could save his dreams without losing the softest pieces of himself. One evening, Maye pictured him alone under harsh light, surrounded by cold coffee, his face older than it should have looked. She could almost hear him saying, "If this fails, it all fails." And in her mind, she answered what every mother wants to answer at the edge of her child's ruin. "Then come home. Just come home." But Elon was not built to come home that easily. Not because he did not love home. Because somewhere in the architecture of his heart, home had become something he had to earn. Safety had become something distant. Approval had become something conditional. Peace had become something he would allow himself only after one more impossible victory. That is why Maye's love mattered differently. She could not stop the rockets from exploding. She could not make the factories quiet. She could not silence every critic or heal every wound. But she could keep remembering him before the world renamed him. She could remember the child who stared too long at things other people ignored, the child who carried thoughts too heavy for his age, the child who sometimes seemed arrogant only because he did not know how to translate fear into ordinary language. And sometimes, when he snapped or withdrew or answered too quickly, she seemed to understand the hidden translation. He was not always saying,
I am above you. Sometimes he was saying, I am overwhelmed. Sometimes he was saying, I cannot fall apart here.
Sometimes he was saying, "Please do not ask me to explain the part of me I never learned to explain." Love is not simple just because it is loyal. Mothers of strong sons know this. A son can make you proud and afraid in the same breath. That was the turning point of the story. Not a launch, not a business victory, not a stock price. It was a mother's refusal to let the world have the final word on her son. One night after another storm of criticism, she imagined asking him the question mothers ask when they can no longer pretend they are only proud. Are you happy, Elon? He might have looked away, because men like him often know how to answer every question except the one that matters most. I am busy, he said. That is not what I asked. And there, in that quiet space between the question and the answer, lived the whole human cost of his life. The world heard the conqueror explaining schedules, deadlines, Mars, machines, and survival. She heard the child inside the conqueror, still asking whether home could be safe. Years passed, and the world only became louder. Elon Musk became a name that could start an argument in almost any room. To some, he was proof that one restless mind could bend history. To others, he was reckless, abrasive, too sharp, too impossible to forgive. Maye had heard all of it. Praise can be noisy. Condemnation can be noisier. But motherhood has a different sound. It is quieter. It is older than applause. It does not begin when a child succeeds, and it does not end when a child disappoints the world. She could see the distance between Elon the public figure and Elon the son. The public figure stood beneath stage lights and spoke of impossible timelines. The son still needed someone to ask if he had eaten. The public figure argued with the future. The son still carried yesterday in his bones. And that is why this story matters. Because the emotional center of Elon Musk is not only in the companies, the launches, or the battles. It is in the contrast between the man the world attacks and the boy his mother still remembers. There is something deeply human there, especially for anyone who has raised a child and watched that child become a stranger to the world. A son grows taller, richer, harder, more famous. He buys houses, starts companies, hires thousands, makes enemies, becomes unreachable. But in a mother's memory, he is still standing in the doorway with tired eyes. He is still too serious, too alone, still needing a hand on his shoulder, even if he would never ask for it. Maye's love did not erase Elon's flaws. It did not soften every sharp word or excuse every difficult choice. Real family love is more complicated than that. It sees the flaws clearly and loves anyway. It remembers the wound beneath the behavior. It holds two truths at once. He can be hard to understand, and he can still be worth understanding. That may be the most powerful thing a mother gives a son like Elon. Not blind praise. Not defense against every accusation, but memory. The memory of who he was before the armor became permanent. The world saw the man who would not bend, but Maye still saw the boy who had learned to survive by going quiet. And perhaps that is why, in the most human moments, the story of Elon and Maye does not feel like a story about fame at all. It feels like a story about every mother who has ever watched a grown child walk into a hard world and wished, just once, that she could place him back at the kitchen table, put food in front of him, and say, "You do not have to prove anything tonight. You are home. Maybe Elon would not know how to sit still in that kind of peace. Maybe his mind would run toward the next crisis before the meal was even warm. But for one moment, in the imagination of a mother, he would simply be her son. Just Elon. That is the part history often misses. We measure men like Elon by what they build, what they risk, what they break, what they conquer. But families measure differently. They measure the missed dinners, the late calls, the pauses before a son says, "I am fine." They measure the exhaustion in his face when nobody else is close enough to notice. So when people ask what Elon Musk has really survived, the answer may not be only failure, bankruptcy, grief, criticism, sleepless factories, or impossible odds. Maybe he has also survived the loneliness of being seen by everyone and known by very few. And maybe, somewhere beneath the hard voice and hurried steps, there remains the same old child Maye Musk once watched with worried eyes. The boy who needed protection. The boy who would not ask for it. The boy who grew up and built machines aimed at the stars, while one person on Earth kept remembering the smallness of his hands. Because before the world decided who Elon Musk was, his mother had already loved the child he used to be. If stories like this remind you of the human cost behind history's greatest minds, subscribe for more untold stories from the legends who gave everything to change the world.